Chair, we are now live.
Okay, great. Welcome everyone to the fifth Tree Advisory Board Ad Hoc Committee meeting. And thank you all for joining us again today. We're going to start, if we may, if Lisa, would you mind calling roll?
Sure. So Alan Billingsley,
I'm very much here.
John Boatman,
I'm here too, thank you.
Ed Brooks,
Here.
Pico Mayor Dunlop,
Here.
John Ellers. She's joining, I think. Jesse Gamble, Micah Glassstetter, Melissa Jackson,
Here.
Hank Jones,
Hey, here.
Sean Martin,
Here.
Maya Neff.
Here.
So Denise Nicole Franklin has indicated she may be late, so she's excused for the moment. Jesse Black did send the city an email resigning his position. He felt he had too much on his plate the next couple of weeks to be able to participate. So Chair, that is the role. To date, we can note if Jesse or Micah or Denise join.
Okay, thank you. And then the next thing, I'm hoping we can, would someone please move to approve our meeting minutes from last week or for our last meeting?
I make a motion we can approve the meeting minutes from last meeting.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Okay. The next item of business is we had discussed the possibility of having another meeting if we were unable to finish what we needed to get done here. There were two dates that were put out. It was April 28th and it was May 3rd. Most folks got back and there was, varying ability to attend the meetings. So I think at this point we may want to take a little bit of a vote to see if we are interested in adding an additional day if we need it.
Chair Jackson, I do see that Ms. Gruder has raised her hand. So Lisa, if you want to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I heard a first and a second in the minutes, but I wasn't sure I heard a vote. And for this and potentially for the new date you want to add, we could take a roll call of the votes on those to get some practice.
Okay, that sounds fine. So I think the thing that we need to decide is if we were to throw out the two dates of April 28th or May 3rd, if you are able or would like to attend or could attend, I guess at this point we would say yes. Is that correct, Lisa?
Yes, I would just go down the list of attendees by last name and we would just get a yay or a nay.
Okay, that sounds great. Go ahead and do that then. If you can or are willing to attend either April 28th or May 3rd for a another meeting, let's say yay or nay.
Ellen Billingsley?
I can attend, will attend whenever it is. April 28th would be vastly preferred. Tuesdays are a tough day for me.
Okay.
John Boatman?
Yay on both or either, whatever the group needs to do. I'm here to support the group.
Ed Brooks?
I can do either day. The sooner we know, the better.
Pico Mayor Dunlop?
Yay on either.
Okay. Is Sean Ellers with us yet?
I'm on the phone with her right now. She's joining us.
Okay, we'll come back to John. Melissa Jackson?
Yay for both dates, whichever works for the team.
Okay. Hank Jones,
Yeah, A for either, whatever is most convenient.
okay. Sean Martin,
What's the May date again?
May 3rd.
Yeah, probably could do either.
Maya Neff,
Yeah, I could do either and would be willing to do either.
okay. And I believe Denise is still excused. Jean,
Yes, I'm trying
Hi.
to up the volume here, but I can hear you.
okay, great. We were just talking about the potential of adding one more meeting for the committee, with the
Yes.
two options being April 28th or May 3rd. And so we
Okay.
were kind of doing a roll call in terms of who was able to attend either or both dates.
Okay. Well, as it sits at this moment, my life has changed. I would be able to attend both of those. I will be in town.
Oh, great, thank you. So Chair, we have everyone saying that at least one or both of the dates are possible. I can share my screen.
Okay.
So you should be seeing the roll and the new date. And I know a couple of people preferred the 28th, and it seemed like everybody could do either or the 28th.
Well, if it's all right with everyone, if we could just go ahead and choose the 28th. Would someone be willing to put a motion in for that?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we add April 28th as an additional meeting date for the committee.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Thank you. So April 28th, we will meet again.
Great, thank you, Chair. And I wanted to circle back to the minutes. We had a motion and a second, but I don't believe we had a vote.
Okay.
We can do that by consensus if you like, or I can call the names.
I can call the names maybe because that way
Okay.
you can see it. Thank you.
Alan,
Yay.
John,
Yay.
Ed,
Yay.
Ticomir,
Yay.
John
Ellers?
Ellers, please.
Yep, yep. Yes. I don't know what I'm voting on. I'm sorry.
Oh, excuse me. This is for the minutes. We had
Yeah.
a first and a second to approve the minutes.
Oh, okay. So if it's approved, then yes.
Melissa,
Yay.
Hank,
Yeah.
okay, Sean,
Okay.
and Maya,
Yay.
okay. And I assume we still do not have Denise. Okay. So Chair, that's everything for the logistical items.
Well, right
Okay.
now I'm trying to get volume.
There's one other quick little note I will add is that vote on extra time. No one really wanted to have the extra time, so we didn't add that into the options. No one seemed really wanting to do that. So that's why we didn't put it in there. And then from there, I think we're moving into our code evaluation options.
Chair, Ticomir Dunlap has his hand raised.
There's just something I wanted to say real quick. So I have just read the letter to the committee from Matthew McCarthy. I was a party of record regarding the Guerrero's warehouse project in Woodbrook, and it seems that the oak there has been cut down and development has started before the SEPA determination was final after the appeal hearing. I also understand that the developer had to apply for a retroactive permit. Courtney Brunel knew about this and did not tell me or the committee about it, even though I was a party of record. Further, Ms. Brunel appears not to have informed the committee about the implications of a recent hearing examiner's decision about the Gary Oaks, which has wide implications for the committee's work. as Courtney Brunel appears to be holding back important information from the committee and hindering its work through acts of omission, I think it is right that she immediately steps down from her position advising and guiding the committee. Also, I'm wondering if we will be getting a replacement for Jesse Black, as they have stepped down or resigned from the committee. Thank you.
Okay.
Chair Jackson, if you wouldn't mind, I would like to respond.
Sorry, can I ask for a
Yes.
point of clarification real quick on that?
Sure.
Was that verbatim that you were reading the whole comment there, or was the tail end of that, was some of that your commentary, or was that just verbatim what the public comment was?
No, that was what I was saying. I just was saying that I had read the comment from
Okay,
Matthew McCarthy.
okay.
So having checked with our legal department, there is no legal requirement for the city to have provided notification for parties of record that the tree was removed. The city was notified rather late in the process, and we're also frustrated, frankly, that this tree was removed without permits. They had no authorization to have any permits, and we did require that they apply for permits, and that a permit is effectively on hold until the conclusion of the appeal. Also from our legal department, hearing examiners' decisions are project specific. And so with that, we have not brought that information, aside from what's being included in public comment. We haven't brought that directly to the committee, though we have included it as public comment as received. And we've also taken some of the information that was included in it and added it into the PowerPoint. So I do believe that the city is also trying to grapple with this frustrating situation where a tree was removed without any permit. This is something that we run into from time to time and is, although infrequent, very frustrating and part of the purpose of this committee. So certainly was not my intention to not be upfront. I think keeping with the agenda is a bit of a struggle, and there hasn't really been an open forum for me to give project updates, or I feel like a call to action to provide project updates, specific project updates. So that would be my response.
But I believe the city gave a site development permit before the SEPA appeal was done. So shouldn't.
So a site development permit does not authorize tree removal. It actually is stamped to specifically say you cannot do tree removal. And from my understanding, and we have now done a site visit and are working with the contractor directly, the tree was actually removed before the site development permit was issued as well. So it is a code enforcement problem and something that we are actively addressing, and something that I hope we will have a clearer path to address in the future after we are able to amend the code. Mr. Brooks also has his hand raised.
Okay.
Well, I can appreciate it. And I read that that letter. It was included in the packet that you sent out. And I'm not sure what relevance it has to the committee and what we're doing right now, other than the fact that it did happen. So I'd like to move on, please.
Okay. Does anyone have any comment? And I don't know if it would be something we would discuss as far as a motion towards removing Courtney or not. I don't think it doesn't. Well, I guess I would throw it out and see if anyone is interested in that. And if not, we will move on to the next thing.
I don't think that is in the purview or authority of this body to determine that. I think that Courtney is employed by the city and they make those decisions. So we should probably move on.
I agree with Sean on that. And I think furthermore, any removal means we close the meeting right now and we go off and do something else, and the city determines what they're going to do and push it beyond the date of when something needs to happen. And so basically all the work that we have done is for naught.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Courtney and Lisa will have to advise me if this is something I'm needing to do a vote on or anything, or we just move on.
You can just move on, Chair. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so we will move into our next section on issues and options and a discussion of incentives. minutes, and everyone was asked to do a little homework, and hopefully was able to submit some incentive ideas. And that's, I think, Lisa, I think you're going to lead that part.
Yes, Chair. Hopefully you can see the slides. That should look familiar. It was from the April 5th packet. There were just a few slides on the incentives. In addition to these slides, as you mentioned, several members of the committee did provide input, which was compiled and Courtney sent over today. I'll highlight some of those things as we go through these slides, but committee members should be feel free to share as well. So one of the incentives had to do with making it easier to preserve Gary Oaks. And so there was example from Oak Harbor was provided related to setback, parking, and landscaping. The comments we did receive from committee members ahead of time seemed supportive of these kinds of incentives, especially around the setback. There was some question about whether reducing a parking standard would come up that often, and also whether reducing landscaping would be counterproductive. But generally, on the whole, some ideas for how development could get flexibility and some other regulations to make it a better outcome that was generally supported. The other incentive here for giving a bonus for trees and affordable housing, there was some comments in favor and some comments about whether the incentive should be more tree focused and less related to affordable housing. So we heard a couple of different opinions on that. I'm going to breeze through the other slides with the other incentives and the comments we received, and then we can open it up, Chair. We had, just like with the prior slides, Planet Geo had collected some case studies from their perspective on best practices and as arborists trying to address key issues in ordinances. So here's another one, crediting stormwater requirements based on tree retention. They identified this example from Washington, D.C., but there are other examples in this document that was provided a link, including some from our area in Seattle and Portland. And I believe we also got comments from committee members about examples also locally in Western Washington with this concept. And then another set of incentives could be about giving some kind of development credit for tree preservation. Again, this is somewhat similar to Oak Harbor, reduction in minimum parking requirements, or in North Carolina, credits towards open space areas. So similar to what Oak Harbor was doing, crediting landscaping or parking. These are just a couple of other examples. And so I believe this is just our summary of case study and ideas for best practices for incentives for Gary Oaks in particular, and then in general for trees related to various development standards or incentives. I believe some other folks on the committee offered some other ideas for incentives as well, making it easy in terms of fees or to recognizing the preservation in several different ways for new developments. So with that, Chair, I think we could see if there are any comments that we hadn't yet collected, because we had about maybe 5 or so of the committee members offer suggestions, but could have a discussion for a few minutes on any other tree incentives that you'd like to see carried forward in your recommendations.
Okay. So I'll open it up to, does anyone have any other ideas in addition to these that you would like to bring up or discuss?
Sean?
Yeah, I think that housing is absolutely tied into this just because of the nature of growth that the region is encountering. Cities have obligations to meet growth standards and provide housing. So development is going to happen for the city to meet its requirements. So, I mean, I would think that there should be, I don't know if maybe it's the inverse of what was suggested, but incentive for more density if more tree or green space is preserved, canopy coverage is preserved or included in a project, maybe they can build up a little bit more, particularly in transit corridor areas, things like that, where it makes sense to have more density. I think that there needs to be a greater allowance for developers to do that stuff.
Okay. Anything else? I can't fully see the list, so Courtney or Jonathan, if you see I'm missing somebody.
I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay.
I would just like to say that I'm hoping that as we look at these incentives that we apply them to all folks, not just builders, but also leaders, that we have something that encompasses concentrate on the trees and that everyone kind of, there might be benefits to keeping trees both on your personal property and on commercial properties. And if we could figure out some way to really focus on preservation as opposed to replacement. There are a lot of beautiful trees that are still existing in the Lakewood area, but there's fewer and fewer by the day. And I think if we could figure out some way to incentivize folks, for example, the wood over in the Woodbrook area, if we could figure out a way to incentivize people to keep the old significant trees that are already existing instead of just cutting down trees.
I think the chair's sound cut out for me anyway.
Looks like we lost Chair Jackson.
Okay. I assume she'll.
Yes, sorry.
No,
It keeps cutting out. Sorry about that.
the chair, I think you were mentioning that the incentive should apply to all persons and types of property, and to focus on preservation with the incentives.
Okay. To have it to incentivize that it's better if you're instead of just replanting what you take out.
Okay.
And then I don't know or not, the Woodbrook situation is a perfect example.
Okay, so focusing on preservation more than replacement in the way the incentives are structured.
Yes.
Okay. If there are no further comments, we can move to the next section, Chair.
Okay. I would maybe possibly add one more thing, if you don't mind.
Sure.
It would sure, in reading what the community had to say and in talking to community members, it might be a good idea for us to look at becoming a tree city, like folks.
Yes, I believe that was in some of the comments forwarded to the committee.
Just wondering if maybe as part of this, and to kind of help us with the incentives, we could look to apply to become a Tree City USA, as so many cities in Washington and around the country are in that program.
Okay. It looks like Maya.
never want to hit the unmute button when I want to. The other upside of the Tree City, it would incentivize preservation, and it would also help for tree canopy goals, because no matter what tree canopy goal we really pick for the city, incentivizing people as much as possible to keep the trees that they have will help us hit either a 35 or 40% goal, assuming we're going to go for the higher ones. I hope we do. But yeah, Tree City USA would really help with that. And they'd probably help with public outreach too, as far as like educating people on why they would want to keep trees.
Okay. Are there any other comments? Folks,
Great. I think that means we can move to the next set of slides.
okay. Thank you all for participating. And now we're going to, it sounds like we have some more discussion about Gary Oaks and some more information.
Yes, Chair. The first few slides that were in your packet were pulled from prior decks, but we wanted to come back to the topic. And so I'll just breeze through the first few ones. These are repeats, but generally it was identifying how the state manages priority habitats, including Oregon white oak woodlands. And their last management recommendations were developed in 1998. Lakewood has designated critical fish and wildlife habitat areas, including priority Oregon white oak woodlands. And so we know this is an area that the committee reviewing in its recommendations. These are the codes that Planet Geo was taking a closer look at in terms of their requirements. And so we have provided some additional information this evening that I'll walk through about how these organizations or others manage Gary Oaks, including not just stands of oaks, but individual trees in terms of significant tree size, which has come up as a topic for the committee. So even though your resolution focuses you on Title 18A, Article 3, as part of the scope that the city approved last fall, there was a note that related amendments to 18A would be part of the discussion, and also comprehensive plan policies, which is why we're bringing this forward as to how the critical areas work for Gary Oaks. And that's also why we're looking at the tree canopy as well, because the work program that was referenced in the resolution also talks about the tree canopy goals. So we've talked about incentives in the Oak Harbor condition. I wanted just to bring back some of the information that we were trying to collect to respond to some of the questions and comments that came up at the committee. So first, the definition that the state has of priority oak woodland is here on the slides. So it is referring to stands of pure oak or oak conifer associations. And it does describe that in terms of stands in urban or urbanizing areas, single oaks or stands of oaks less than 1 acre may also be considered priority habitat if found to be particularly valuable for fish and wildlife. And so those are the management recommendations. The links in the slides also was provided in the prior slides. We do have information on the mapping of oaks The Department of Natural Resources has a spatial database. The Sound Oaks website appears to use that similar DNR data. So it is mapped. We know that the level of detail of any of the mapping, whether it's the tree canopy, land cover analysis, or the DNR data, is not a perfect data set, but it is at least a place to start. So moving from the fact that the state focuses on stands, but does have a reference to particular oaks that may have a benefit for fish and wildlife habitat, we then were looking at some of those example codes for the size definition for what's considered a protected tree, I think was the term that Alex was using, Alex from Planet Geo was using last time. Generally, the range that's referenced in the example codes is between 6 inches and 12 inches. So for Lakewood to be a significant tree, and the Gary Oak is 6 inches. For Pierce County, it's 8 inches. We'll come back to Pierce County in a minute. For Thurston, it's 12 inches. And then other codes may not necessarily identify Gary Oaks, but all trees of a certain size as being protected or significant. And so those fall into the range, as does Portland. Pierce County, this is in its tree canopy regulations, 8 inches. In its critical areas regulations, it also refers to particular oaks or stands less than an acre in size as being critical areas if they have a diameter at breast height of 20 inches or more, or Oregon white oak stands with an average diameter at breast height of 15 inches or more, regardless of the stand size. So I believe Lakewood's current critical area regulations focus on stands of Gary Oaks. One of the ways in which the committee could weigh in is we've talked a bit about heritage trees or larger trees receiving more protection. That is one thing you could make a recommendation on. This Pierce County example showing that it's not only stands, it's individual trees. You could also look to as an example. So we wanted to bring this forward. We thought we'd see if you have thoughts or questions. The WDFW representative who introduced himself last time will be attending the April 26th meeting. So what we can do is pass along the comments and questions to him. So to be ready, for your meeting on the 26th. So Chair, we could open it up to questions or thoughts again, so that we can kind of gather those and share any, bring back ideas for you, and also ask WDFW questions.
Okay, so if anyone has any questions or comments?
Looks like Sean and then Alan.
Yeah, just for the next meeting, I would find it useful to know, just in bullet points, exactly if it's called a protected tree, grand tree, historic tree, whatever the terms are, just to know what that really means. Like, what are we actually doing for the tree or the trees in those situations would be helpful to know.
Okay. Alan?
Yeah, just a quick comment. When we look at Lakewood's tree definition of what's significant and try and compare it to Pierce County and other areas, we are unique, and we're kind of comparing apples to oranges. I grew up inside the city of Tacoma. There's no Gary Oaks anywhere. So a significant tree there being 8 inches or 10 inches makes sense to them. But I think if we move away from 6 inches as being a significant tree, we'll be doing a disservice to our community.
Okay, so reflecting local conditions. Ed?
Yeah, I guess I would as far as clarifying some things, if we call it a savanna or whatever, with a cluster of oaks, and a thing that doesn't really appear here as well is what's the condition of the tree itself. You could have a tree that's significant if you're looking at it just by the breast height measurement, I guess. But if it's a single pole that just goes up there and has a couple branches at the top, is that a tree that's, I guess, considered significant versus one that's full of branches and has a drip line that's 8 to 10 feet out from the trunk itself. So I think some clarity needs to be there. And then if we do have a savanna or a stand of trees and we've got some bad ones in the middle of it, most arborists would tell you that it's probably a good idea to do some thinning and some clearing on that. So I don't know how you want to put all of that in there, but those are my thoughts.
Okay. Looks like Tico Mayor.
I just wanted to mention a couple of things. First, where in the resolution does it mention canopy cover? Because I thought it was just about protection. And then also in the state management guidelines, I believe it says that single trees in urban environments can be protected, not just ones in stands. And the Lakewood code, I believe, leaves out individual trees from protection.
Right. So first on the individual trees versus stands, that is something that the WDFW guidelines do talk about single trees that have particular habitat value. So this is something that as part of the recommendations the committee may want to make, you could weigh in on. On the tree canopy goals, so there's two parts to the resolution. I'm happy to pull that up. One part is that the committee focus on Article 3 with the tree preservation code. The other part of the resolution refers to the work plan that was approved by City Council last fall that started this work, and it had two components. One was a tree situation assessment, the canopy assessment, and the other was the code evaluation, which also referred to not only Article 3, but related chapters like critical areas or the comprehensive plan. So if you were to go by the strict read and say Article 3, the only part of Gary Oaks would be the significance of Gary Oaks. But we read that the second part of the resolution talks about the work plan, which said it would be Article 3 plus these related items. So that would be my clarification there. Chair Jackson?
Yes, I think a good definition for heritage trees or trees, substantial trees will be great if we can come up with one, something that makes sense. It might have to be type of tree specific. I think that the measurement of a Gary oak, of course, around versus a Douglas fir versus a birch tree versus, we may have to figure out some way to delineate between the tree types. I was just out of interest researching at the Woodbrook Native Plant Nursery about, they sell Gary oak trees, and one that's 10 years old is about 4 feet high. So again, I think we really need to kind of do some considerations around the types of trees that we're talking about as much as possible.
So by height rather than diameter, breast height is total height. Is that what you're?
Well, more so tree type. Okay. So yeah, alder, we did a little bit to help with definition what a tree is, or a heritage tree, or a protected tree.
Sure. It looks like Maya.
Yeah, that makes me think something good to ask the tree representative in a couple weeks. Is there a breast height measurement versus height of total tree ratio that can help us figure out how old a tree is? if we're looking at type specific, like Melissa was suggesting, because there may be a way for us to, that they know of figuring out breast height versus height to figure out relative age.
Sure. We'll ask both Planet Geo, because they have Alex and Chris are both certified arborists, and we'll ask WDFW if they have any particular information for Gary Oaks. Micah?
Yeah, I was just curious, because there's obviously a lot of minutia that we could cover over type of tree, age of tree, diameter of tree, availability of tree, health of tree. My question is, is our basic thrust of what we're doing here is to try to manage and perhaps increase canopy coverage and protect Gary Oaks? Are those the main two priorities?
Yes, I think that's a pretty good statement of what we've seen so far. The code does have a purpose statement. It talks about preserving trees for open space and for critical areas, the current Article 3. As the scope was approved last fall by the council, part of that included the canopy assessment, and that started the conversation. And also the city passed an equity statement, so that started the conversation about tree distribution and canopy size. And by setting a goal for canopy, the city could use that both in developing an urban forestry program, which the comprehensive plan references as a goal, but it also could help the city in developing the amendments to the code. So amendments to the code in terms of what, preservation or incentives, as we've been discussing. But yes, I'd say preservation of trees, especially Gary Oaks, has come up quite a bit. And then the other part is just increasing canopy. And the committee may have others, but I think that would be something the committee could put in its report. What are the main goals that you've seen, both in the background evaluation and in the community comments, the code update?
Okay, because really, I have a lot of ideas that I think would be workable as far as getting more Gary Oaks in the ground and protecting more Gary Oaks, and just being a tree service, that being my vocation, and I rarely leave Lakewood. And I tried to get this across last time when I was actually going on a walk on Anderson Island, so I don't think I was coming through very clearly. But the number one condition of removing a Gary Oak tree is the 17,000 square foot exemption, by far. And a lot of people who move into this area are pretty ignorant when it comes to the value of a Gary Oak, the age of a Gary Oak, how dangerous a Gary Oak is or is not. And that's where I feel like I'm beating my head against a stump, trying to help people understand. And I've successfully helped people understand that an oak can be a very good neighbor and you should keep Gary Oaks. And since I've been on this committee, I've talked many people into it. But it's a losing battle. And I can tell you, in the last 3-4 years, I personally have removed hundreds of Gary Oaks in Lakewood, because if I didn't do it, somebody else would. And I've been trying to save them from the firewood pile, but it's really not meaningful. It's not helping anything. And when I looked at one of the feedback letters we got, where we have somebody in the community trying to stop 125 oaks from being mowed down by a warehouse plan, that is in and of itself important, and it's a big deal. But I can assure you, there's a lot more Gary Oaks being removed, bits and pieces, just because of our current tree code.
Well, one of the items in the draft report that comes up after this topic is committee to start weighing in to build the report, and one of the items is what you'd like to see for the residential exemptions and the industrial exemptions are both on the list for the committee to consider tonight.
Okay.
Thank you, Micah. Are there any more comments about the Gary Oaks in particular? Okay. I think possibly, Lisa, we could maybe move into the next where we can start, voting on some of these things or talking about some of the things we're wanting to change as a committee.
Yes.
If you want to take us through that.
Yes, that'd be great. Okay, so we sent out a cover memo on top of the framework report. The framework is very similar to what we covered at a higher level at a prior meeting. And it was a way to put down on paper some of the options that the committee has been weighing and to take votes on those items that then can help direct the revisions to the code. So we're trying to keep it at themes and concepts, so but specific ones. So for example, around the tree canopy goal or around the exemptions, so that you can weigh in on particular pathways to go forward with. So I'll just go through just the first, this first part of the report is just laying out what are the portions of the resolution that this report is responding to. It was what we were talking about a little bit earlier, that the Tree Advisory Committee is focusing on the regulations in Title 18A, Article 3, Chapter 70, Article 3. Those were attached to this document. And the second part is that the work plan be consistent with the scope of work that the city approved last fall. And so that included that tree canopy situation assessment and a tree code evaluation. So that's what this report is built around. And it describes the seating of the committee. And we've just highlighted this is as of April 8th, so last Friday. We were trying to identify the various options that had come before the committee. And so we thought we'd take 3 of the items where it seemed like you had quite a bit of discussion at your prior meeting and seemed to be heading down some potential common directions for discussion. And then if you're comfortable, then to take a consensus vote. So I'll just pause there, Chair, before we get into the 3 items we wanted to share with you, just to see if you had any comments or questions, or if anybody does, before we get into the heart of it.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions, comments? Sounds like we're going to move through 3 key issues and vote on those. And is that essentially what we're doing?
Yes, Chair. What I can do is walk through each issue, and then I do have that spreadsheet if we're ready to go into that. But generally, the way this will work, once you are ready to make a motion, is there would be a first and a second to a particular motion, and then there would be discussion and then a vote on each. So I'll just describe for each what some of the background information is, what the options are. Then if somebody is ready to make a motion on the options, then they would do so first and second, and then discussion and a vote. And then we'll go on to the next item. So this first one is about the tree canopy goal. The idea is to set a tree canopy goal to provide landscape level information about tree extent in public and private lands and by zoning district that can assist with the tree preservation code options and to consider equity. So we summarized the information that was provided. So Planet Geo presented information on the tree canopy on your meeting in March 15th, March 29th in particular. Your current citywide tree canopy cover estimate is about 26% as of 2019, and about 72% of that is located on private land. And so setting this goal could help with identifying priorities for preservation, considering the effect of code standards by zone, areas underserved where canopy can be added, et cetera. We highlighted some relevant plans, policies, and information related to the setting of a tree canopy goal. This includes, in the comprehensive plan, instituting an urban forestry program to preserve significant trees, promote healthy and safe trees, and expand tree coverage. So that would be relevant to the tree canopy goal setting. There's also some more specific policies around planting and maintenance of street trees, providing for the retention of significant tree stands and restoration of tree stands, and ensuring the retention and planting of trees to promote air quality. The resolution 2105, which is the City Council's resolution last year regarding the equity statement, commits the city to practices of equity, including ensuring equity in municipal planning. We linked to the presentations that were relevant to the tree canopy assessment. We also provided in this document an article regarding the value of setting tree canopy goals and the loss of tree canopy across the US, including in Washington. And community comments showing an interest in tree canopy goals for equity and environmental purposes, though others thought a focus should be on the code evaluation itself. So the options that were put before you at prior meetings were to set a tree canopy goal of 40%. Regionally, the goals are between 30 and 40% at different years, but the idea for Lakewood is this could be a goal for 25 years, like a 2050 goal, year 2050. Another option that they identified was 35%. Both of these would take you above the 26%. We shared some other examples in the region, like Lacey, that had a no net loss goal. So these were the items that seem to represent options that came before you and that you've discussed. So we presented these to the committee for your consideration. Chair, it looks like there's a couple of members that wanted to speak to this topic.
You can call them out as I am on a phone and I can't see whose hands are
Oh,
raised.
sure. Alan, and then Ed.
Okay, back on the page before us, we're specifically talking street trees. And I've seen in other municipal codes, the addition of the words parking areas. And I would like to see that expanded besides just street trees. Street trees alone create issues such as, constant maintenance, vehicle traffic and such too. And we're looking at remodeling one of our family restaurants here in Lakewood, and we'd like to move our trees in off the street a little bit and put twice as many of them in. So I think parking areas are an important element in that can be included.
Okay. All right. It looks like Ed next.
Yeah, if you could flip to the options, 3 options that you had on the next page.
Sure.
I guess just clarity, I understood option 1 is 40% over a 25-year term. Is that correct?
I believe for both 40% and 35%, the idea is that it would be a long-term goal out to about 2050.
So would you be looking for a motion to approve what's written, selecting a goal, or that these are the goals that are stated, that came up?
I would suggest selecting a percentage or an option that around which the comprehensive plan could have a goal, a long-term goal. And we can be more specific in your motion if you want it.
Well, I'm going to make a motion then to approve goal number 1 with the optional or a set goal of, just to be nice, 37.5% over that 25 years. Just splitting the difference.
I see. Okay. Okay, that's an option then for the committee to consider. Ticomir.
I think we should probably do 40%.
Okay.
Well, as a point of order, there's a motion on the table, so it either dies for lack of a second, but the chair needs to make a decision on that motion.
Do we have a second?
I'd like to second the motion on the table, 37.5.
Okay. Thank you. So 37.5 is one of the options for us to vote on.
Just for clarification, that is not one of the options. That is the option that I made a motion on.
So that was a first by Alan and a second by, was that Sean? I couldn't quite.
First by Ed, first by Ed, second by Sean. And so now we can open it up for discussion and then we can hold a vote on that motion.
Looks like Alan has his hand up.
Yeah, just a short comment. I would say goals should be set high. We're not looking at where we're going to end up in 50 years. We're looking at a goal. And typically goals are set high. I'm very much for the 40% coverage.
Micah?
I guess my question would be, and this was probably gone over, but just for clarity, this 37.5% goal, tree canopy coverage, that's overall everywhere in the land areas that it's possible.
Correct.
So
that's a citywide goal.
We could, just as an example, we could increase tree canopy coverage in some of the parks. We could increase tree canopy coverage perhaps in some of the schoolyards that don't need all that grass. Or, I mean, like where, because that's ambitious. I mean, if we're at 25% now, increasing by 12.5% or 15%, that, I mean, that's big. I hope people understand what that means. I'm all for it too, but it's got to be feasible. We got to figure out how that's going to be done. Or is that completely up to the powers that be at the city? We just say 40 or 35 and they go, okay, we'll figure it out.
Well, that's a good question, Micah. The presentations that Planet Geo provided, I believe it might be on the one on the 29th, they did for both the 35% and the 40% identify how, at least for across the zones, so residential zones are the biggest zoning area in the city, have the largest tree canopy already, and cover the most territory. And so they identified sort of a proportionality across all the zones in the city, as to like just to set sort of ways you could get there. Other ways, as you mentioned, are on the open space areas. That was another larger area that could potentially take more trees, rights of way. So it was across the board, I would say.
Because what I've seen, and I don't know who did this, but it's right behind Pierce College on the Fort Silicon property, kind of between the back of the college and the water towers that are up there. There's a whole bunch of Gary oaks that were planted, and my best recollection, it was in the last 10 years, maybe 10 years ago exactly, and they're all doing really good. and there's no irrigation up there, whatever. So something similar to that. I mean, there's just a ton of space for Silicon Park alone that currently is just, you know, grass and Scots broom and blackberries that nobody really wanders through, that could be turned into urban forest.
Thank you. Courtney, before we go on with the others on the list, do you want to make a point of clarification?
Yeah, I just wanted to Micah's point regarding this committee's charge. I do think that this first option is twofold. First, you're making a recommendation to City Council that you would like to see a goal established. Second, you're making a recommendation on what you would like that goal to be. In terms of the nitty gritty and the nuts and bolts, as you put it, for how that is accomplished, I do think that that would be the City Council's charge and task to figure out, and any future department that is assigned the responsibility of monitoring it.
Thank you, Courtney. Maya.
Yeah, I think we're better off going for broke at 40%. And if we hit below that, things happen, but we might as well go for broke and go for the highest and get the city to consider the most amount that we can do for preservation and replanting as possible. And then I think Jean's been trying to get a hold. I don't think the raise hand function works for her, and I think she was trying to say something.
Oh, thank you, Maya. Sean?
Yes, thank you. I had a couple of thoughts, but I had questions as well. My question is, why are we including residential concerns along with industrial or recreational areas in terms of trying to identify what the need really is? That may sound odd, but I think they ought to be handled differently. I think we're better able to determine and encourage others to determine what's important for the overall community when we have a big lot, such as industrial people who love to come in, clear out the land and put up their big warehouses and car washes in Lakewood. I'm curious about that.
Sure. Well, Sean, we will be...
Sorry to jump in, but I feel like we're kind of getting away from the motion that's on the table, and I'd like to call for the question on that to get that settled.
Okay, I understand that. The problem I have is that I will hold off and let's go on with the motion, but I was actually trying to get my question out there a long time ago when we were on the subject. So please go ahead, let's get the motion.
Well, thank you, John. We can come back to those. Chair, we do have 4 more hands raised. And so do you want to call for the question? There were others, I think, wanting to contribute to the discussion.
Okay. I think if your question pertains to selecting from these 3, or if you have a comment, or I think we should give them a quick minute to voice their opinion. If it doesn't necessarily do the 37.5 discussion, then we can maybe hold those off. So keep your hand raised if you have something you'd like to address about the 37.5.
John Boatman.
Thank you. I agree with Alan's comment about goals. First of all, Ed, that was awesome. You know, you stepped out there and you made the first one. So, you know, hats off to you, sir, and your courage. You have more than I do. A goal should be difficult, but it should be obtainable. And Courtney, you actually beat me to the punch on that one. I was going to remind us all that we are making recommendations to the city council. City council will be the party that will make the final decision. That's their elected position to do. So I'm definitely in the wheelhouse of higher than 37.5%.
Ed?
Thanks, John. I guess probably the question that hasn't been asked about this. And as a point of clarification though, Melissa, I think when a question is called, they're actually saying, I want to call for a vote. It's not asking for questions. But we are where we are right now. But when it comes to increasing it, so, and I'll ask this to the experts, of the other areas that you've worked in and increasing canopies and everything else, how long does it take to increase 1%? Is it 4 months, 6 months, a year? How long does it take to do that?
And I believe that's a question that Planet Geo could respond to better than I, but based on their information provided in March, they were looking at goals for up to 25 years for these higher numbers. I do know that there are shorter term goals that Tacoma and Seattle have set for closer in periods to go, like partway from where they are to 40%. So they might set 30% by the year 2030, for example. But these were calculated, the information was calculated for Lakewood as being a long-term 25-year goal. And I think, as Courtney mentioned, what would happen is the city would identify sort of the phasing and how to get there.
Okay, and that's helpful, good information. John, if you want to make a friendly amendment to my motion, and I'll go along with it if Sean wants to.
I don't know if you said Sean or John, sorry.
I actually said, John, if you want to make a friendly amendment to the motion, then I would be happy to acquiesce if Sean will, and we can move it to 40%.
Yeah, I would, yeah, what you just said, forgive me, I can't just repeat it.
I accept if Sean does.
So for the record, then I do recommend amending the recommendation to 40% by 2050.
Okay, so it's like we have a motion on the table. At the point of Lisa, we could vote on consent.
Please.
Unless someone else has something else.
I'm going to pull up my worksheet.
So,
and we can. This is the canopy goal. I'm going to put in here 40%. The chair, if you're ready to call for the question, then I can run down this list.
okay, so are you in favor or against, yay or nay, for 40% as our tree canopy goal?
And
you were going to.
Alan? Yes.
I say yay in every sense of the word.
John Boatman?
Yay.
Yay.
Ed Brooks? Tico Mayor Dunlop?
Yay.
Jean Ellers?
Yay. Yeah.
Micah?
Yay.
Melissa Jackson?
Yay.
Hank Jones?
Looks like he dropped off the meeting.
Okay. Sean Martin?
Nay.
Maya Neff?
Yay.
And I don't believe Denise has joined us. She wasn't sure. Is that correct? Okay. Chair, the motion passes. We have a majority of voting in favor of the 40% goal.
Okay. We have about 15 minutes left. So do we want to go ahead and tackle key issue 2? Would we like to go ahead and try for that?
Okay. Yeah.
Yes,
Chair,
we
I'll
will.
share my screen.
Okay.
We can just take 1 minute on the engagement side of things, so that shouldn't stop us. Ticomir, are you asking a question for this topic, residential lots?
Well, I just wanted to ask point something out with the canopy goals.
Chair,
Okay.
would you like to go back to that?
Yep. Tico, quickly, if you could. Yes.
Okay. I just want to point out that, like, why not have a more shorter term goal like Seattle has? So I feel like not only long term, like 2050 goals should be considered.
Okay. We can definitely put that in the notes as a suggestion or a comment. Okay. Lisa, are you wanting to read through key issue 2, or would you like me to?
Sure, I'm happy to.
Okay.
So this has to do with the residential lot exemption. Currently, there's an exemption for residential lots less than 17,000 square feet in single family areas are currently exempt. They have this residential zones collectively have the greatest share of tree canopy cover in the city. A large portion of lots is below the exemption level and would not be subject to the code. Information reviewed include the tree canopy evaluation on the March 15th, community comments, including concern about the loss of canopy in Lakewood, with some identifying residential areas. So the options presented to you: retain 17,000 square foot residential lot exemption. One option presented to you in prior information was to set it at 10,000 square feet, considering average lot sizes. And the third option is to remove the lot size based residential exemption.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments about the 3 options? Or comments?
It looks like Ed has his hand up.
Yeah, I think during the discussion on this stuff, I think what we probably missed out on some of it, and I think I understood Micah on this and his desire to remove the lot sizes, because when somebody comes into 5, 10, 15 acre parcel and they want to do a development in there, the way they can remove all of the trees is to get it down below a certain, the threshold level. So that makes sense in the concept of a developer coming in to do a 40 house plat or something like that. Where the difficulty comes in is if you're an individual homeowner and you'd like to expand or tear your house down, build a new house, and do some things on your own lot that you've lived in for a period of time, or a house that you bought, and you can't do anything. I think that's where the struggle comes into play. So there may be something where I think it could be a twofold exemption, I guess. One is like no size exemption for large new plats, and maybe something different for existing older plats that are beyond XYZ years, whatever it is. And that option's not there, but I think it's something that should be discussed and entertained, because that's really where they, excuse my language on this, where the rape and pillage comes in, is on large plats that are being done.
Ticomir?
I just want to point out a couple of things. So even if one gets rid of exemptions on lots, that isn't necessarily going to change much, because if people can still get a permit easily for things, then trees will continue to be cut down. And also there should be the exemption for removal of 1 to 4 trees a year, I believe, without a permit on large lots should also be removed.
And I wanted to mention that we will, as we get to other sections of the code, we will be filling in options for some of those topic areas. We're kind of starting with the bigger stuff. John Boatman?
I'm going to add on to what Ticomir just said. My understanding is that if we remove the lot size exemption, that people will have to apply for the permit. Now, what the granting of that permit, that's separate. That's what the city will do in their permitting process. Clover Park School District has absolutely gone through that permitting process multiple times with the city for trees that are hazardous. We've never said we're going to remove a tree because we want to, because that's not the way that the Clover Park School District functions anymore. That said, I think it's two different things. And if there was a motion for removing the lot size, I think that we trust the city to handle the permitting process and hope that the citizens will apply for those permits as they need to, if they need to do something on their smaller size lots.
And to respond, there will, if you work your way further into the report, that's sort of blank on the options, we have created places for what the permit process would be and what the standards might be for those permits. So we haven't gotten there yet. This is just to what will the code apply. So you'll get your chance, in other words. Sean Martin.
Yeah, I was actually kind of a blend of the two comments there. I mean, in agreement with John about that there are two separate things here. I mean, to just say, well, you know, we're going to blow out the square footage lot size thing, that really doesn't, that in and of itself isn't really meaningful to me without knowing what's occurring on the other end as far as the permitting and the rules around that stuff. And then that gets into tons of details that we talked about briefly about, are they feed or are they free or, you know, whatever in between. So, you know, I guess if you're saying that's a little bit further in, I you know, hold off on that. I do also agree that there is a difference to me in between an owner maintaining their property versus a large scale thing coming in. I think that, you know, again, this ties back to my earlier comment with incentives and preservation and trying to tie those things together, especially for the new construction. Because, you know, the land costs are high, construction costs are high, everything's getting more expensive. You know, there's less places to go to build out. I think we got to find a way for people to build up that can lead to tree preservation as well. So to me, maybe bifurcating those two things makes sense, and saying, you know, maintenance of a lot is maybe a little bit different than just leveling, raising stuff to the ground to build new. So I'd be in favor of looking at things that way.
Micah?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that as well. There's a lot of details to add and flesh out everything. The problem with having this square foot exemption is that there's incentive to subdivide your property, and we are encouraging urban density in Lakewood to the point where then you don't have to get a permit. So even if it was 10,000, you can build on 10,000 feet easily. And if you take a 40,000 square foot lot, subdivided into 4 lots, then suddenly, you know, you got everything's under the threshold for getting a permit. So have everybody playing by the same rules in the city, having more insight into each situation and some say so. It seems smart to me. And then continue to incentivize people to retain trees and build around trees, even if that means second stories.
Hicomere, and then John, and
so I just wanted to say that for the appeal on Alpharetta, the hearing examiner's decision implied that all large Gary oak trees are a critical area, and in order to get a permit for cutting down trees on critical area, that requires a ecological assessment and a mitigation plan. So I just wanted to point that out, that so basically that implies that most or all large Gary oaks would be critical area.
thank you. Sean, did you have anything to follow up on your earlier comment?
Well, in fact, yes, I was feeling that some of what my thoughts were in terms of having residential concerns mixed in with such, we need to maintain, of course, some sense of goals and making sure that we are keeping up with the requirements for maintaining tree habitat and so forth. Tree habitat, that's not what I meant. Keeping X number of trees available and not to continue to minimize and destroy trees when we really ought not be. But I was concerned about residents, single family residencies, even, you know, in some situations, multi, depending upon how large it would be. I somehow see the need for there to be a separation in how we look at things, because there just seems to be, in my thinking, and I don't believe I'm at this point able to truly communicate my thoughts. It's just kind of busy for me trying to keep up with, am I hearing it? So this Zoom is great, but it's not being effective for me for now. But I believe that we need to reconsider how we're handling the citizen, private homeowner citizen, their piece of land, and there needs to be X number of goals set in terms of how many trees per se we're going to have on lot, or how many trees would be permitted on the lot. But I really am sincerely concerned that things would be handled in such a way that the citizenry will have the sense that it's okay for them to do what they want to do, in a sense, to their own property. And that's where you need some regulation so that people don't just go haywire. But I do believe there needs to be a separation of how we're looking at things, residential versus industrial, recreational and such.
Sure. Thank you. Alan?
Yeah, I think the lot size specification in our code is one of the main flaws with the whole system. Frankly, it doesn't put everybody on an even playing field. And I think as we move through the rest of the working of the code that we're recommending to the city, removing that residential lot size opens us up to setting specifics like incentives, building up, moving closer to your property line, as opposed to cutting that tree down where you want to do a remodel.
Yeah. Chair, I wasn't hearing a particular motion or second.
I wanted to ask about that actually. And we were looking for a motion. How within our charge here, is it a motion on one of these three? Because I think that there's merit to the discussion around the removal, but I would hesitate to just do that outright without including a recommendation that incentives be considered, particularly for existing owners, and ties into a lot of things that probably gets beyond what we we're responsible for doing here.
Sure. It doesn't have to be one of these three. These were the ones discussed previously. It looks like we have another option added on the table here, distinguishing plats versus other lots. We have a question from Ed, but Chair, I want to mention it's 6:29. So do we want to keep going with the discussion to come to a conclusion on whether we have the right options on the table?
Can we make a motion to extend the meeting by 10 minutes? Would people be okay with that?
I guess, maybe before that, real quickly, my thought is that you've heard a bunch of things, Lisa, and maybe go back and regurgitate that, bring it in with the incentive piece of it, so that we have a fresh look at something a little bit different, knowing what this discussion is.
So I'm hearing that there's general agreement that the exemption level that's set now is not workable, and that it may be appropriate to take off the exemption altogether, provided there's incentives associated with it, or that there may be sentiment to take off the exemption for new plats, but not necessarily existing lots. So that's sort of a summary of what I've been hearing so far. we will be getting into other parts of the code as we progress at your next meeting.
Okay.
Chairman, I would like to move.
I would.
Go
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'd like to move that we vote on option 3 to remove the residential exemption and see where we are when we're done with that. If we're a split house, then we know we need to come back and work some more.
Okay.
So that's my motion.
Do we have a
Second.
Second.
perfect? Thank you. Hey, Lisa, we are now going to vote on yay or nay as to whether to remove the lot size based residential exemption, number 3.
Okay, I'm going to share.
Just to clarify, that was moved by Alan and it was seconded by, was that Maya? Who made the second?
I think John may have beaten me to it.
Okay, okay.
It was a.
Can I make a friendly amendment to the motion?
It is.
Would like to move that the motion be amended to include council undertake or take into consideration incentives for existing property owners as well as development, just broadly.
Alan, I can get behind seconding that.
Absolutely. And I think really that's our intent as we move further down this list too.
Yes. Yes, exactly, Alan. That I think that Hank, we're actually going to be discussing a lot of those finer points as we move through. This one just has to do with the actual exemption, and then we get into the details of that later. That's my understanding. Lisa, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I'd also say that this is subject to who has to make a permit. That doesn't mean that the permit, as we've talked about, is approved or denied. So in addition to coming up with the fact that permits are now required or would be required for residential lots in itself requires that new regulations be written as to how those would be reviewed. And that's a separate topic. But in order to prompt that discussion, we need to know what it is we're looking at, which is all residential lots are under or over a certain threshold.
Okay, so the waters seem to be a little bit muddy. Do I need to then have it be, we're going to be voting on removing the lot size based residential exemption? Or are we doing that with the amendment?
You need a second to the amendment. I think that you received one from Mr. Boatman.
Okay. So our first vote will be to remove the lot based residential exemption with the amendment that Hank mentioned, which I need a little refresher exactly on what that was.
As a point of order, if there's a friendly amendment that's been accepted by whoever made the motion and seconded it, then that is the new motion.
Mm-hmm.
So the motion would be to remove the residential lot exemption, provided there are incentives for residential lots.
I believe you're correct on that. However,
yeah.
it's a real muddy motion. It really doesn't say much.
Is it possible to have you explain what makes it muddy?
No, because I mean, I'll explain to you why I will vote no on it. It's not because I don't believe in parts of what we've discussed, but the reason I would vote no is because what is the incentive? I mean, we're saying, okay, there's going to be an incentive, but we don't know what it is. So we're taking the lot size minimum off. And I think, and that's why I was suggesting that, you know, staff go back and take a look at this and come back with something that's a little bit clearer, or another point that comes back that is clear for us to discuss it, versus saying, okay, we're doing this. And when it gets to, to city council to vote on, what are they going to do with it? So I just have a concern that we're going to make a recommendation that's not clear enough for anybody to really do something with. And I believe our charter is to kind of make clear recommendations on how we move forward. So that's my issue.
may I say that I agree that things need to be clear because I've been here operating in the total fog, not sure where we are off to. So I appreciate your comment. Thank you.
Okay, so from here, do we go ahead, Lisa and Courtney, do we need to take a vote on this, the amendment number 3 with the amendment? We have to vote on that, is that correct?
Yes, Chair Jackson.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and vote on, again, removing the lot size based residential exemption and then considering incentives as well.
Alan,
I'm going to say yay.
John Boatman,
I'm going to say yay because I have faith in this group to be able to work the things out that we need to for the incentives.
Ed Brooks,
Nay for the reasons I've cited.
Ticomir Dunlop,
Yay. Yay.
Jean Ellers,
I'd like to abstain.
Micah Glastetter, is Micah with us?
Yay, sorry, I was muted.
Okay, sure. Melissa Jackson,
Nay.
Hank Jones, is he still? Okay, Sean Martin.
Nay.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Nay.
Nay, okay, thank you. Maya Neff,
I'm gonna say yay.
we have 5 yays,
We do not have
3 nays.
failed.
Ed?
I'm just going to
Sorry,
say,
Courtney, could you repeat
it's
that?
not clear, it's not a clear victory or a loss, if you will, either way. I think that right there bodes to the fact that it needs clarity. And so I'm throwing the suggestion out there that staff go back, work on this a little bit and bring it back to us for further discussion, or you can pass it as you want. It doesn't matter right at this point in time.
We don't have a majority, so the motion did fail. Hearing the discussion tonight, Lisa and I will go back and we're going to work to fill out the rest of the framework and the rest of this report so that you see all of the options that are for consideration. I think that the intention with how this is structured is that we're trying to bite off one piece at a time. And the fact that we're separating that out over multiple meetings is probably confusing. And so I certainly see why before you remove an exemption, you want to see what we're talking about for incentives. So we'll bring it back and be able to look at both collectively next time.
Okay. So we're going to save this vote for the next meeting. Is that correct?
Yes. So we have our next meeting, just for some housekeeping, on April 26th. And then it was voted tonight to hold an additional meeting for April 28th. The April 26th meeting packet and agenda will likely be identical to what you have on the April 28th meeting packet and agenda. It'll just be a continuation of whatever items are not completed on that final scheduled meeting prior to this meeting.
And as far as homework is concerned, or you would like us to submit questions that we might have for our Fish and Wildlife representative for the meeting?
That would be
okay. So hopefully everyone gets that. If you have questions that for our Fish and Wildlife representative, that will be on the call on the 28th, I believe.
26th.
Okay. Could you please submit those to Lisa and Courtney?
I would ask that if possible, you have those to us by the 18th or the 19th at the very latest. That way we have time to prepare Mr. Masters and incorporate any response he may have into our packet.
Okay, great. Thank you. And unless there's any other comment, I think that closes our meeting for the day.
Thanks. Good night.
Okay.
Thank you.